Okay. Tov, everyone. Thank you. So we spoke a lot on Shabbat, different opportunities about Vayishma Yitro. What exactly was it that Yitro heard that caused him to come? There are many different interpretations on this. Can add a couple that maybe we didn't mention on Shabbat as well. But the truth is that the whole pasuk is very strange when you think about it. When you read the pasuk, there's a lot of the questions just jump out. Vayishma Yitro kohen Midyan choten Moshe et kol asher. The Torah says Yitro heard. What did he hear? Et kol asher asa Elohim leMoshe u'Yisrael amo. Everything that God did for Moshe and for his people. Ki hotzi Hashem et Yisrael miMitzrayim, because Hashem took Bnei Yisrael out of Mitzrayim. In other words, the pasuk says it very clearly exactly what he heard. He heard about Yetziat Mitzrayim. He heard everything that was done. Right? More than that, forward a few psukim, then it says Yitrokai Vaysaper Moshe lechotno et kol asher asa Hashem leFaro leMitzrayim al odot Yisrael et kol atla Hashem mitzatam b'derech v'atzileim Hashem. Right? Moshe tells his father-in-law, he tells Yitro everything which Hashem did. So interesting, there's a change. Before it was everything Hashem did to Moshe and to Yisrael Amo. Now it's everything he did to Paro and Mitzrayim. But nonetheless, everything that he did and how Hashem saved the Jewish people. So if the Torah is already telling us, and Yitro already knows what happened. He heard about it. That's why he came. Vayishma Yitro. And now he's being told about it again. Moshe Rabbeinu is coming and telling him. Why is he telling him? Why does he bother? He already knows. So I've always thought that this Vaysaper Moshe is like what we say on Seder night. Right? Going on and telling him. There's one thing about knowing, about hearing the story, hearing the theory of what happened. But when you hear it firsthand from somebody who was there, when you hear the story and you have the personal details and you go on and you tell again and again, you go into more details, right? We're coming up to another month until Pesach. Don't mean to scare you off, but it's coming. But that's the idea. We always talk about it, that when we tell the story on the Seder night, and again, we're not just telling something that happened once upon a time somewhere to somebody. We're telling about what happened to us. We're telling our story. Boy, we got a story to tell this year, right? It's not just about what happened long ago, but it's about everything, and it's about what we're going through, and that's the continuation of that story as well. Let me, on that note, let me share with you a story that I heard today about one of the hostages. An amazing story. Yeah, so many of the stories that are coming out and the things we're hearing, you would. It's hard to believe that these are real, but they are. So this is a story that was told about half a year ago. Rabbi Shai Shechter has told us in a shir that he gave. It's to do with one of the hostages who was released yesterday. So there was a picture of him today, the chief rabbi, putting on tefillin. He just come back. Now he's not a religious person, as far as I know from what I heard in the story. What's that? Oh, is that right? The first time in his life, he didn't even have a brit milah. Meaning you have to understand this is how anti the family was before, and but just before, last week I saw the mother when it was announced on Friday who the hostages were who were going to be released, and the mother said. She asked Am Yisrael to light candles and to have them in mind, etc. And she went to the place beforehand so as not to break Shabbat, because she was keeping Shabbat. Okay, this secular Russian immigrants who had beforehand had absolutely no connection, to the extent that they didn't even give their son a brit milah. But now she's keeping Shabbat. So this is a story, and this is how it happened. So I'll tell you. So Rav Shai Shechter was telling the story. He said he was on a number of months ago. He was on a visit to Israel. And he met with some people, and one of the people he met with was a woman by the name of Yelena Trubanov, who is Sasha's mother. She herself had been a hostage earlier on, right? Sasha's girlfriend as well, Sapir. They'd all been together on Simchat Torah, and they'd all been taken hostage separately. So none of them knew where each other were. The mother and Sapir, they were released at the first deal way back when. Anyway, and he tells the story. This is at the time when Sasha was still being held hostage and nobody knew what would happen. So they just put out a video about him. And so this is what happened. So essentially, Sasha and Sapir, they went on Simchat Torah. They went down to They went down to Nir Oz to be there together with them on that day. And of course, we all know what happened on that day. So he tells a story. He says how Sasha's mother and the grandmother were both taken hostage. He was taken hostage. Sapir was taken hostage. And again, all of them were alone, so nobody knew exactly what had happened. So in the first hostage deal, when it took place, right, his mother and grandmother, they were released. And he tells the story. And essentially, the mother, many months later, is telling the story. And this is what she's saying. She's saying, Sasha, he's an only child, right? The mother says she came here from Russia by herself. She has no other relatives in Israel, nobody else with her. Right? She has a mother, right? But he says that basically when her mother came back from captivity, she was institutionalized. She wasn't able to reacclimate to life again. And she's alone by herself in the world. And then she was talking, and she says like this. She says that one of her biggest concerns at the time was that when, and again, no, she didn't know when it would be. Sasha, we know, was released yesterday. But she said when he would come out, he wouldn't recognize her. He wouldn't recognize her. Why? She says like this. She says, I'm a different person. So he says to her, what do you mean? He thought she meant physically, I thought she didn't do it. She said, no, not physically. I mean like this. She says, now I keep Shabbat. She says, I keep kashrut. She says, I daven every day. The family was so anti-religious to begin with that her son doesn't even have a brit milah. He's going to come back from captivity. What's going on? Who am I? Who are these people? So she says, right here, and he says he didn't want to try. Rav Shechter was telling a story. He says, I didn't want to ask her what happened, whatever. She says, I'm sure. She says, I'm sure you want to know what happened. How did I go from being somebody who's who hasn't even given the son a brit milah to somebody who's keeping kashrut and Shabbat? And she tells the following story. Now, the story, so he says, at first I didn't believe the story. He spoke to the other person who was there. She corroborated the story as well. The story goes like this. She says one of the nights when she's in the tunnels, and the terrorist who's looking after her, whatever that means. Okay, so he says to her, and they have a conversation. She says, so he says, you're a Jew, right? So she says, yes. So he says, okay. So if you're a Jew and you know what it means to be a Jew, he says, what are the 10 commandments? What did I say to do? Why does he pick on that? I don't know. Whatever. So he says, you're a Jew. What are the 10 commandments? So she turns to him, to this terrorist, and she says, actually, I don't know. I've never learned. I don't know what they are. So he says, he looks at her in the eye, and he says, how can you call yourself a Jew? You don't even know. You don't know anything. So then that night, he goes to the other side of the tunnel, to where Sapir was, her son, Sasha, his girlfriend. And she's there. The terrorist knew the two of them had some sort of a relationship. So he goes to her and he says, so you say you're a Jew. So you tell me what are the 10 commandments. Now, she's also not a religious person, but she knew a little bit more. She goes through, she manages to think of nine out of the 10. So he says, okay. So the next morning he goes back to the mother and he says like this. He says, shame on you. He says, shame on you. He says, this girl is going to marry your son. He says, she's a Jew and you're not. He says, she at least knows. She knows what the Aseret HaDibrot are. You don't know. How can you call yourself a Jew? And she says, this woman Yelena, she says she felt like the terrorist who was standing there was holding up a mirror in front of her. And it was like asking her to look herself in the mirror and say, okay, I call myself a Jew. What does that mean? Right? I'm a Jew because I live in Israel, because everybody on the outside, everybody says that they're Jewish. But it doesn't mean anything more than that. If I was living somewhere else, does it actually mean anything? I don't even know what the Aseret HaDibrot are. I don't even know what Shabbos is. What Shabbat is, right? So she said there and then, she says, I don't know what it is, I don't know what it means. But when I get out of here, if I get out of here, however it is, I'm going to go, I'm going to find out, and I'm going to start keeping it because I want to be whatever it means to be a Jew. So she comes out and she starts keeping Shabbat, she starts keeping kashrut, she starts davening. The son comes out and he put on tefillin for the very first time. And so she told the story and she said, you should know, your community is very lucky. You were raised with these values. You know these things. She says, I've never had that. I don't know them. But even you, she says, you need to look at the mirror all the time you're trying to be. So that was the story. I thought it was quite something quite remarkable, quite unbelievable. And that's essentially what we're talking about. When we talk about stories, Right? This is some of the stories that we have in our generation, but I think it relates very much to when we say, what did Yitro hear? Right? So I was going to talk about something else, but we don't have time. But 10 to 6 is right? Okay. So, but just very, very, very quickly. So when it says Vayishma Yitro, the pasuk says he heard everything. But we know that there's a machloket amongst the Tanaim. There are three understandings. One says he heard about Kriyat Yam Suf. One says he heard about Milchemet Amalek. One says he heard about Matan Torah. Rashi says Kriyat Yam Suf and Milchemet Amalek. Why Rashi takes two of the three opinions, he combines them. What does that mean? We spoke about it on Friday night. But maybe what it means, and part of the understanding, we spoke about it a little bit on Shabbat morning, but related to the story, what does it mean when we say Yitro heard about Milchemet Amalek? Meaning, what was it that caused this person, this Kohen Midian, to get up and to go and to join the Jewish people? What causes each and every one of us to get up and to go and to act like we are part of the Jewish people? Sometimes it's the Milchemet Amalek. Sometimes it's what you see from the outside. Sometimes those who hate us, or those who turn against us, and those who are fighting against us because we are the Jewish people, because we are Am Yisrael, because you're a Jew. That's what happened to Yitro. That's what I think has happened to all of us as a society over the past year and a half, or however long, is that seeing that reaction, seeing that response from the outside, and that maybe forces us to look inwards and say, okay, they hate us, they're doing this to us because we're the Jewish people. What does that mean that we're the Jewish people? How are we going to act? And what are we going to do with that? Rabbi Kenigsberg Mincha Maariv Shiur